What's up, friends? Welcome to Raj's Reviews. It's me, Raj, and I'm back with a new review. Today we're going to be checking out a beloved series, a series that I grew up with, a series that I fell in love with all the characters and I binge watched the seasons many times through. This show is back with a brand new reboot that is quite an interesting ride. Today we're going to be checking out the Icarly Reboot. So the Icarly Reboot is a Paramount Plus exclusive that just came out in 2021, and it essentially allows us as viewers to revisit the Icarly gang once again, but in a modern setting. Now, most of the gang is back. We have Miranda Cosgrove as Carly, we have Jerry Traynor as Spencer, we have Nathan Kress as Freddy. However, there is one member missing. Jeanette McCurdy will not be returning as Sam. Now, this was due to a variety of reasons, some of which she said were due to incidences that occurred on set that she just doesn't feel comfortable returning to the set for. Beyond that, Jeanette essentially said she didn't like Sam, the character in the past. She didn't like how she was portrayed as a character, and as such, she isn't really interested in revisiting Sam as a character and playing that role. And as such, she will not be in this show and will not be in the seasons moving forward. And that's not to say Sam isn't discussed in this show. She is quite a bit. And we do have two new additions to the cast that kind of help to fill in the roles that Sam left and also help to bring new light to this cast. So first off, we have Lacey Mosley, who plays the role of Harper. So Harper is Carly's best friend, and she doesn't necessarily play the role of Sam. She's not really Carly's co-host anymore. Harper is really a best friend who helps Carly with advice, who guides Carly a little bit when Carly has decisions she can't decide between, and they have an awesome friendship that is fun to watch blossom as this show goes on. Harper's a very outgoing and unique character that you will grow to love most likely, as she's pretty funny. The final addition to the cast is Jaden Triplett, who plays the role of Millicent. Now, Millicent is actually Freddy's daughter, and that creates some interesting situations. So starting off with the plot, essentially this show follows around Carly and her brother Spencer, Freddy, her best friend, as well as the new characters as they explore Seattle in the modern world. And each episode is centered around its own plot, and each episode offers a little bit more insight into Carly's world, the situations she deals with, trouble she gets into, and her experience restarting her Icarly brand. Now, starting off with the characters, the gang's back. If you loved the original characters, you're gonna love them again. The show did such a fantastic job of retaining their personalities, their quirks, their characters over the years, and you really feel like it's an iCarly show when you're rewatching it now. They did an amazing job of capturing how scenes are set up, how characters interact, how characters act, how characters speak. They did an amazing job of setting it all up to be so reminiscent of the original, and when you watch it, you're really gonna have a hard time distinguishing the past versus the future. The Icarly Reboot is essentially a perfect reboot of the original Icarly show. That, however, does lend to some complications that I'll discuss a little bit later, but if you're looking for the original gang to be back, look no further, because they're definitely back here. Now, one thing they didn't necessarily retain, which I am uncertain as to what might have caused this, but some of the acting just isn't the same. Whereas in the previous series, you could really fall into the show and really feel like you're in the world with these characters. Now, it's very easy to see that they're playing roles, and it's very easy to see that they're reading off scripts. It doesn't seem as flowy and as natural as it did before. That might be because before they were really sold on the roles, and now they're just kind of, voicing it in and doing it for money maybe. Nevertheless, it doesn't draw too much from the show and should still be able to enjoy it. Spencer, however, is as fantastic as ever. His energy and his personality from the previous show was definitely carried over into the reboot, and it really helps to brighten up so many of these scenes. He was my favorite character in the past, and he continues to be my favorite character. The classic characters really helped to make it much more engaging than it would have been if it was brand new characters altogether. I will say the show's not quite the same without Sam and without some of the original hijinks they got into together, but it does have its own new charm. I mean, the situations that Carly and the gang get into are very modernized. The topics they talk about are very much in the real world today. They are grounded in reality, and you can learn a little bit about life and the experience that it is for modern artists, modern influencers. You can gain insights on all of those aspects through this show, and each episode has its own problem that the gang tackles that's very fun to learn more about and to gain some insights on. I will say the plots of each episode are very straightforward, kind of like the original, where a problem arises at the beginning, the middle is where the problem escalates a little bit more, and then the end is essentially a resolution of the problem without a fail. It's always the exact same thing, rinse and repeat. Now, each episode is unique enough to where even though the general plot structure is the same and even though everything goes down quite predictably, now don't expect too much. There's no plot twist, there's no insane endings, there's no amazing situations that occur that will make you love this show. It's all very straightforward and basic. However, there are some scenes in the show that will make you smile, and there's some scenes that will make you laugh. I will say there is enough shine in the show to keep you watching, to keep you interested, but altogether, to get through all of 13 episodes and to continue watching in case they make a season 2, season 3, and so on and so forth, you're really gonna have to love these characters. If you don't fall in love with the new Freddy, new Carly, and new Spencer, you're not gonna like this show very much, just because it's really dependent on these 3 characters and the 2 new additions to carry the plot and carry the show all together. In terms of what's unique, I think personally for me, one of the most unique things was just seeing all these characters grown up. These are characters I felt like I grew up with as I watched season after season when I was growing up. It's engaging to see how these characters have fared over the years and what they've amounted to after all this time. So overall, I personally give this show a 3 out of 4. However, if you aren't a fan of iCarly, if you haven't watched the originals, if you have no connection to these characters whatsoever, for you, I would give this show a 2 out of 4. And what I mean by that is, if you love the original series, if you love iCarly and those characters, I recommend checking out the Icarly Reboot. It's worth it just to get an essence of those characters again. It's worth it to see how those characters have fared over the years, to see them interact in their new settings and their new personalities with their new backgrounds. So it's worth it if you like the originals. If you haven't watched the originals, this is not necessarily the best way to get started. It's a little bit choppy, the acting isn't all the way there, the jokes are not perfect. There are some that land, however, the only thing I would say that's worth it in the show is the plots that are discussed. Some of the topics are, as I mentioned before, very modern, and there are takeaways that anyone can learn from. But outside of that, there's not really too much for an audience base that doesn't like the original or that hasn't watched the original. So let me know in the comments below if you have checked out the new iCarly Reboot, if you liked it or not. Like and subscribe if you like this type of content. And now we'll be moving on to the Parents Guide. The iCarly Reboot is rated TV-14. So in terms of violence, I give this show a 1 out of 5. There's really no violence. There's some mild arguments and yelling that are sometimes escalated to arguments, but nothing really violent, nothing physical. There's nothing to be worried about in that sense. In terms of sexual content, I give this show a 3 out of 5. There is some sexual content, I will say. There are some sequences, specifically one where characters get into a situation where they have to navigate a threesome, essentially. And I won't say more. If anything, I hope that entices you to watch this show. But there are sequences like that. Topics like that are discussed in this show. Now, none of it's too explicit. There's no actual sex scene or any nudity in this show whatsoever. So none of it's too bad. However, I will say it is for a little bit of an older audience, one that's a little bit more mature. So in terms of language, I give this show a 2 out of 5. There's the S word, D word, relatively infrequent language. It is there, however, and as I mentioned before, it's magnified because every character reacts to that swear word. It's very obvious that the scene kind of freezes up when characters swear. And so because of that, it's very, very noticeable when characters swear. Again, there's no F word, there's no extremely strong language. However, it is something to watch out for. So all in all, I would not necessarily recommend this show for the same audiences as I would recommend the original for. The original is very much aimed for a younger audience. This show, I would say, is definitely for teens and above. if not older teens and above. Altogether, I would say if you're fans of the original iCarly series and you're a little bit older, I recommend giving it a shot. It's not as bad as you'd think, and they did a pretty good job of retaining the personalities of these classic characters that we know and love. If you haven't checked out the original, if you know nothing about the iCarly show, the series, then I would not recommend checking out the show, as there's not much you're going to find in here that you're going to like. So altogether, again, let me know in the comments below if you have checked out iCarly. Until next time, I'll catch y'all later.